The most arrogant young man I have ever encountered in my tenure as a judge strode into my courtroom one Tuesday morning and proclaimed my lack of authority. His name was Derek Martinez, a 21-year-old whose father, Roberto Martinez, was the county sheriff. Within 15 minutes, he received a comprehensive lesson on what true authority entails and how it is applied. The incident began with what appeared to be a routine drunk driving arrest, occurring on a Saturday evening around 11 o'clock. Derek was driving his pickup truck when he struck Mrs. Henderson's mailbox on Maple Street, a quiet residential area where neighbors sleep with windows open and children safely ride their bicycles on the sidewalks. He was traveling at 40 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone when he lost control, completely destroying the brick mailbox and nearly damaging a fire hydrant. Responding officers found Derek near the crash site, exhibiting undeniable signs of intoxication. A strong smell of alcohol, slurred speech, and an inability to stand steady during field sobriety tests. His blood alcohol content was measured at 0.12, significantly exceeding the legal limit of 0.08. This seemed to be a straightforward impaired driving case, destined for standard legal procedures, including booking, court appearances, and predictable penalties. However, the Martinez family operated far outside the ordinary. The situation escalated when the arresting officer, Sergeant Williams, a 15-year veteran of law enforcement with an impeccable record and no prior accusations of impropriety, attempted to initiate standard procedures. This involved handcuffing Derek, informing him of his constitutional rights, and transporting him to the station for booking. Instead, Derek made a phone call, not to an attorney, family member, or associate who might arrange bail, but directly to his father, Sheriff Roberto Martinez. He claimed to have been detained by incompetent officers and demanded immediate release. Sheriff Martinez arrived within 20 minutes, dressed in his full uniform, badge prominently displayed, rather than in civilian attire befitting a concerned parent. He announced that this was a family matter, that his son had simply had too much to drink, and that it should be resolved privately, without formal charges or paperwork, as he would ensure his son was safely transported home and appropriately disciplined. Sergeant Williams, a man of unyielding integrity, calmly explained that driving under the influence was a matter of public safety, not private family business. He pointed out that Mrs. Henderson's destroyed mailbox constituted property damage requiring official action, and that Derek's blood alcohol level of 0.12 necessitated processing according to department protocols, irrespective of any familial connections. Sheriff Martinez abandoned any pretense of civility and resorted to intimidation. He physically positioned himself and explicitly threatened Sergeant Williams, stating that Williams served under county authority, that the sheriff held absolute control, and that if Derek was not released without charges, Williams would be reassigned to traffic duty at an elementary school by morning. These were direct threats, leveraging his official position to obstruct justice and interfere with a lawful arrest, actions that constitute felony offenses. Despite Sheriff Martinez's apparent belief that his badge granted him immunity, Sergeant Williams stood his ground, refusing to be swayed by corruption, even when cloaked in official uniform. He meticulously filed all charges and documented every interaction, including the sheriff's attempts at interference, recognizing that exemplary law enforcement officers protect justice above personal or institutional self-interest. The following morning at 8:15, while reviewing the overnight arrests with a cup of Christina's strong Italian coffee, I noticed Derek Martinez's case file was unusually thick for a routine drunk driving offense. I also saw Sergeant Williams's supplementary report detailing Sheriff Martinez's interference. Roberto Martinez had served the community admirably for many years, maintaining professional operations within his department and achieving a reduction in crime statistics. Yet success often tempts individuals into believing that regulations apply only to others. Possessing authority does not inherently breed corruption, but it certainly exposes any existing tendencies. Derek Martinez arrived at 9:30 precisely, exuding a casual, affluent air, dressed in designer jeans, expensive athletic shoes, and a leather jacket that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent. While his attire was noteworthy, his demeanor was more concerning. characterized by a swagger and a smirk that suggested an unspoken understanding of his privileged position. His father wisely abstained from attending, likely sensing that his previous evening's interference might attract undue scrutiny, though this tactical withdrawal would not shield his son from accountability. Christina announced the charges: operating under the influence, property destruction, reckless operation, and resisting detention. Derek approached my bench, radiating an attitude devoid of concern, unlike typical defendants who show apprehension or respect as those aware of serious legal violations, or embarrassment as young people recognizing grave mistakes. His demeanor suggested mere annoyance at having to be present, as if this were a bureaucratic error requiring correction once his identity was recognized. I reviewed his record and the incident report before asking if he understood the charges of operating a vehicle while intoxicated with a .12 blood alcohol level, property damage, and reckless driving. He responded affirmatively with an air of boredom, as if discussing a minor infraction with a high school principal. Before proceeding, I felt it necessary to offer a clarification, using phrases often employed by individuals who believe personal connections trump legal authority. His explanation framed the situation as a disproportionate misunderstanding, asserting that his father had already conferred with the relevant parties, treating the drunk driving, property damage, and endangerment of neighborhood residents as simple misunderstandings rather than serious violations. When questioned about the nature of this misunderstanding, given his .12 blood alcohol level and his 40-mile-per-hour collision with Mrs. Henderson's mailbox in a 25-mile-per-hour zone, he complained about the arrest and court proceedings, much like common criminals. He then asked if I knew his father's identity, deploying the common phrase, "People believe that solves problems." I confirmed my awareness of his father's position before asking if he understood my role. He dismissively characterized municipal judges as handling minor local matters, such as traffic violations, small claims, and petty offenses, while his father commanded the entire County Sheriff's Department, operating on entirely different levels. This demonstrated a complete lack of understanding regarding governmental structure, checks and balances, and the separation of powers essential to democratic systems. I explained that within this courtroom, I determined outcomes for those who violated the law, including drunk drivers, regardless of their connections to law enforcement. This elicited genuine laughter, as though I had delivered a comedic performance for the amusement of the courtroom observers. He then declared, with blatant disrespect, that I possessed absolutely no power, that while I might believe I controlled decisions, his father controlled all officers, all arrests, all evidence, and all enforcement, rendering me incapable of affecting anyone, merely a figure in robes pretending authority. This entitled young man had just informed a sitting judge that he was powerless because his father wore a badge, asserting that law enforcement families were exempt from judicial authority, that sheriffs outranked judges, and that corruption triumphed over justice when accompanied by official uniforms. A profound silence fell over the courtroom as defendants, court officers, bail bondsmen, and Christina stared at this individual. He had declared, "Judges lack authority over sheriff families," and palpable shock permeated the atmosphere as witnesses grasped the unprecedented nature of what they were observing. I slowly rose from my bench, deliberately allowing the weight of the moment to settle upon everyone present, and asked if he had indeed declared me powerless. He replied, "I merely stated facts. You require evidence for convictions, and my father controls the evidence. You need police cooperation for enforcement, and my father controls the police. You need jail space for sentences, and my father operates the jails. Therefore, concerning my family, you are essentially powerless. That is simple reality." He genuinely believed the justice system operated as a game in which his father held all the advantages, that sheriffs superseded judges, that law enforcement families were immune from consequences, and that badges conferred a separate class of citizenship with special privileges and protections. Behind Derek, other defendants watched this exchange with astonishment. Most were working people who could never imagine telling a judge they were powerless. They understood that courtroom respect was not optional and that challenging judicial authority was akin to challenging gravity, momentary satisfaction preceding a painful fall. I continued to explain his fundamental misunderstanding of how American justice systems operate. However, he insisted with perfect clarity that power protected power, money protected money, badges protected badges, and that his father possessed real power, including guns, badges, jail cells, and the ability to make lives difficult, while I merely possessed robes and wooden hammers. He perceived judicial authority as mere costume jewelry compared to his father's badge, viewing democracy as a hierarchy with law enforcement at the apex and judges below, receiving orders rather than issuing them. I informed him that I would demonstrate the true nature of power within a democracy, and then proceeded to sentence him to the maximum penalties for a first offense: a 6-month license suspension, a $1,000 fine, 40 hours of community service, mandatory alcohol education, and a 60-day county jail term with work release privileges. His smirk vanished instantly as he protested that this was impossible. Officer Rodriguez approached with restraints at my instruction, prompting Derek to shout about his father's disapproval and threaten my removal and career destruction. This outburst constituted contempt of court, earning him an additional 30-day sentence as he was restrained and read his constitutional rights. All while he continued yelling about his father and how this would not stand, and how I didn't understand whom I was challenging. Yet the beauty of justice lies in its indifference to paternal identity. 2 hours later, Sheriff Martinez telephoned, requesting a discussion about his son's situation. I explained that sentencing had occurred according to law and that no discussion was possible. He characterized Derek as a good youth who had made one poor decision, suggesting an arrangement might be feasible. I stated that the law makes no exceptions for law enforcement families, despite his 25 years of commendable community service, which I acknowledged but deemed insufficient to purchase immunity for his son. After a prolonged silence, his voice hardened. He declared that he controlled all county law enforcement, rendering my courtroom powerless without his cooperation. I identified this as a threat and advised him that interference with sentencing would result in contempt charges and arrest by the state police. I then disconnected and contacted the state attorney general's office. Investigators arrived within 1 hour and documented his attempted interference. The true test arrived that evening when Derek was scheduled to report to the county jail for his initial night, with an 8 o'clock deadline. The deadline passed without Derek's appearance. I contacted the jail directly and learned that Sheriff Martinez had spent the entire evening actively preventing his son from serving his sentence. This prompted my call to the state police, requesting a warrant for failure to report. Within 30 minutes, state troopers arrested Derek at a party, where he was still drinking, presumably celebrating his father's protection. They transported him to state holding, bypassing the county jail entirely. The following morning, Derek returned to my courtroom, clad in orange detention attire and restraints, his arrogance entirely absent. I explained that his failure to report for his 8 o'clock sentencing constituted a violation, as 8 o'clock is a precise time, and his father's interference constituted obstruction of justice, despite his attempted apology. I therefore added 90 days to his sentence for failing to report and referred his father's interference to the state attorney general for investigation. Derek's face paled as he asked if I intended to have his father arrested. I confirmed that his father's attempted obstruction of justice was a felony offense, regardless of the badge he wore. 2 weeks later, state investigators arrested Sheriff Roberto Martinez, while Derek served his complete sentence in state custody, without any special treatment. 6 months after his release, Derek returned to speak at a young offenders program. He stated he wanted to inform these children what he had learned about true power. He explained that he had previously believed his father's badge rendered him untouchable and that judges were powerless compared to law enforcement, a notion that proved completely false. He addressed the teenagers, explaining that real power is not about connections, but about accountability. He stated that this judge had taught him that no one transcends the law. He subsequently completed college and became a counselor. His father served 18 months in federal prison and lost his sheriff's position. The new sheriff, Captain Rodriguez, visited my chambers and stated that the Martinez case had transformed their department. When asked about my thoughts when Derek declared me powerless, I explained that I was thinking of every citizen who had been told that connections matter more than the law, and I had decided to prove them wrong. True power, I explained, is not about badges or weapons, but about ensuring that justice applies equally to everyone. As Derek Martinez learned, Judicial power is not costume jewelry, but the very foundation of democracy. His father, in turn, learned that wearing a badge does not place anyone above the law. My father used to say that raw power without accountability is simply tyranny. The Martinez family learned that lesson through difficult experience. I am Victor, reminding everyone that in America, the law is the ultimate power, and no one is above it.